Two small chaps out playing in the backyard. Happy sounds as they're playing together. Then turn into not so happy sounds. It's mine. No, it's mine. I had it first. And then coming to blows. And then the familiar voice from the back steps of the house saying, Milt, Jimmy, yes, Daddy, you know the rules around here. Daddy, do I have to? Yes. And we walked up to the feet of our dad and put our arms around each other and hugged each other. Now, I got to admit, fellows, that we gave a little extra squeeze, And then he says, and next, and we go, no, Daddy, do we have to? Yes, you do. And we kissed each other upon the cheek. Now, I was fortunate to have parents that stressed the importance of forgiveness from my earliest years. Today, the great truth about sin is not the badness of it. The great truth about sin is not what it does to us. The great truth about sin is not that it points out guilt. But the great truth about sin is that God forgives. Amen. The word forgive is a common one in use today. But how many of us have ever stopped to think about what actually happens when we forgive? The essence of the word is giving. The main part of the word is give. When we forgive anyone, we are giving that person release from any harm that may have done to us. We give up any intention on our part to get even. If you owe me $40 and you don't pay, and I forgive you, I release you from owing me the $40. Now, forgiveness does not mean that I tell you what you did was right. If what you did was right, then there was nothing to forgive in the beginning. We have heard in Old Testament times, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And we think, oh, that's tough. I'm glad I live in New Testament times. Aren't you glad you live in New Testament times? But it was not as bad as you would think. If someone blacked your eye, you could only black their eye. Someone knocked your tooth out, you could only knock their tooth out. You couldn't go further. You couldn't retaliate further than the harm done. Someone does us wrong. Our first impulse is to hurt them. We want to pay it back, and we want to pay it back fourfold for the harm they've done to us. In fact, we naturally wish to annihilate them. You say no? Well, are there any people that you wish weren't on the face of the earth? Have you not wished that at times? Getting even with people that do us wrong is a real delight. To have been done an injustice and to be able to pay it back really appeals to the human heart, and thus we cling to the hurt. We hold it tight. We're not about to turn it loose ever. Most of the time, the chance to retaliate against them does not come. But when it does come, we are stimulated. When somebody does us wrong and we get mad and the chance comes to get even, we walk around with more life in our steps than we've had for weeks. There's spring in our steps, our eyes sparkle, our hair literally stands on end. What's left, we are going to get even. And then, the nice thing about it, if somebody does you wrong and you're mad at them, you don't have to treat them as nice as you treat other people. And we find ourselves asking a question of Jesus relating to forgiveness. Do I have to? Instead of obeying the known answer. Now, Matthew's Gospel in the 18th chapter are some words of wisdom for Jesus for us. Matthew's Gospel, the 18th chapter. If you'll look at it with me, please. Matthew 18, beginning with verse 21. Jesus wants us to forgive, and one of the clearest examples is found in the question of Peter that leads to a story by Jesus. A story of someone who was forgiven much, refused to forgive a little. Matthew 18, beginning with verse 21. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I say to you, I do not say up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Therefore, now Jesus is going to apply something, isn't he? The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had brought them to him to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife, with his children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave the debt. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 1,000 denarii, and he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me that which you owe me. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. But he would not, but went out and threw him into prison till the debt should be paid. So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved, and came and told their master all that had been done. Jesus continues in saying, Then his master, after he had called him, said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Should you not have also had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. And now Jesus applies a hammer. So my heavenly Father also will do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. Picture that story with me for a moment. One of the cruelest stories ever told by Jesus, a story of a man with a short memory. Forgiven for so much. Avoiding his wife and kids being taken from him and all that he had. And then going out after he's forgiven and grabbing someone who owes him just a little bit and grab him by the throat and say, Pay me what you owe me. Our original reaction is but one of disgust. We are repulsed by one who could stoop so low to do that. Now, when I look at this story, my difficulty in identifying it is to why the forgiven servant would behave thus. We're talking about silver versus mere pennies. Why would he behave thus? And the answer did not come to me until I examined this word, forgive. For I give. For I give. To give someone the right to do you wrong. That means I give you the right to do what you did to me. Then I saw, to refuse to forgive this right is to hold a grudge. The cruel servant was holding a grudge against the one who owed him a small thing. Therefore, the grudge holder could get all worked up, grab him by the throat, and tell him what he said. Now, with this in mind, I tried to make this story my story. Folks, that's Scripture. Taking the stories of the Bible and applying them to other people is a non-profitable process. The stories of the Bible are meant to be applied to ourselves, right where the nitty-gritty of where we live. Now, with this in mind, I did try to make the story my story, to identify myself with the character in the story. Yes, the repulsive, bitter, disgusting character. You know, to forgive is peace. Did you know that? Tremendous peace to forgive. To refuse to forgive is holding a grudge. In matters of money, it's clear. Someone owes me. They don't pay. I forgive them. They don't pay it back. I gave them the right. That's okay. But when it comes to my character, when it comes to my integrity, then I get uptight, and forgiveness is hard. I think of, for instance, of the elder who took my name off the church books while I was in the United States Navy. I'm not a terribly intelligent fellow, and you'll find that out. I was a student at Shenandoah Valley Academy, an Adventist academy. In my senior year, I was pastor of the boys' club. But I got disgruntled with the faculty and my life in general, and two twin brothers and I left in December of our senior year in academy and joined the United States Navy. Philip and Daniel Snow. One short, one tall, one fellow not so smart. We got on a plane in the middle of December and went to Chicago, Illinois. We got off the plane in Chicago. Boom! It was cold. Being from the South, I always had heard that hell was hot. After that experience, I readjusted my thinking. Pretty soon, we all looked alike. They shaved our hair off, even the eyebrows. They gave us shots in every arm and every other part of the body they could reach until we were half sick all the time. They gave us baggy clothes that we all looked alike. In fact, they pretty effectively dehumanized us, and boy, were we showing that academy. We went out in the snow of Great Lakes, Illinois, above Chicago there. And they marched us every day and drilled. They gave us a rifle. They called it a piece, and we had to take the piece with us everywhere we went. And if we ever dropped it, we slept with it. Every day we marched and drilled, and it was so cold, and I had never experienced anything like this in cold. And I remember standing in ranks, and when the moisture came from my nose, it would freeze there because I was afraid to remove it, but hey, they'd get me for moving. Day by day, and then one Sunday morning, they marched us to a large building, but to our surprise, there were seats there. They were going to have a church service. We thought church is good. The speaker got up, Chaplain Mole, a United States chaplain in the Navy, the only Seventh-day Adventist chaplain in the whole Navy. And as he spoke, we looked at each other and we said, this is unbelievable. He's got to be an Adventist. You know Adventist talk, don't you? We have this jargon that we use. He's got to be an Adventist. And we sat there, and when the service was over, we found ourselves irresistibly drawn down to that makeshift platform they had from which he spoke. And we were going to ask him, was he an Adventist? And he walks over to us and he kneels down and he says, "You three are three young men running from God, aren't you?" Whatever we were going to say never got said. A couple of days later, we were in ranks. The company commander barked out, and I mean barked, "Snow, Snow, Pruitt, front and center." And we go, "Oh no, what have we done now?" And he said to us, "Every Saturday morning, you three will report for worship service with the Seventh-day Adventists at the base chapel." And we said, "We don't want to go to the worship services, sir." And he says, "You see that insignia on my arm? I'm a first-class petty officer. That chaplain is a lieutenant commander. He outranks me. You will go to church every Saturday." Talk about a Sunday law. How about a Sabbath law? I went faithful to Sabbath services for months. With my two friends, Chaplain Mole arranged for the Catholic chaplain to get me my Sabbaths off on ship. That's an interesting way to spend the Sabbath with sailors. Try keeping the Sabbath there. That Roman Catholic chaplain also got me my conscientious objector status. I came home from the service, and I found out that they had made me, while I was gone, they had made me a non-Adventist. My bitterness, my grudge was very real. Non-Adventist. Now, isn't that an interesting term? Our niece came to stay with Patty and I at times, along with our children, and she said to me one day, after she went to church with us, she says, "Uncle Milt, why do Adventists call people that aren't a member of their church non-Adventists?" I go, "I don't know, Angie. You're a Baptist. What do you call non-Baptists?" She said, "Lost." I went away from God and His church, holding my bitterness, my grudge. And then I went down to my hometown in North Carolina, Moccasin Bottom. We used to say it was the only town in the United States with the entrance and the exit sign on the same post. I went away, but then one day, I had my Nebuchadnezzar moment. While I was in the Navy, I never drank beer. I never liked the taste of it. I never understood why anybody would like the taste of it. I never drank it. But in my Nebuchadnezzar moment, I said, "Bring on some beer. And while you're at it, bring me on some pork hot dogs." Went home that night to my cousin's house, and I remember in the middle of the night crawling across the living room linoleum floor of her house, trying desperately to get to the restroom where I could relieve myself. My aunt the next morning says, "Milt, I wish you guys hadn't have done that. I wish you hadn't have drank." But she says, "Milt, tell me something. I'm puzzled. What's pork hot dogs got to do with it?" She said, "You were crawling across the floor saying, 'Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll never eat a pork hot dog again.'" That was the beginning of my journey back. God was not finished with me yet. And I went to Columbia Union College, met Patty, became a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. Then I went to the General Conference session in Atlantic City, New Jersey. I sat on the center aisle, and I looked across the aisle, and that elder that had made me a non-Adventist was sitting across the center aisle from me as a pastor. He sees me as a Seventh-day Adventist minister. I made sure he did. I got the badge that way. He looks at me from a distance with a rather strange look, and I felt he should come up to me and admit he was wrong. He didn't. I felt the impress of the Spirit go to him. No way. The expression on his face was pure grief. Perhaps the Spirit was having as much trouble with him as it was with me. I had him by the neck, and I enjoyed it. Said I'd never make it, did he? I regret to say that I left that general conference session of God's people with my heart that way. But God never gives up on us, does he? Later, I went to the HMS Richards lectureship on preaching at Columbia Union College, sat down on the center aisle, looked across the aisle. There he was. I felt the impress of the Spirit go to him. And I said to myself, forget it all. I can't go on like this. Help me. I'm going to treat him as if he'd done nothing wrong. I can't go on holding this grudge. I've got to give him the right to do it. What he's done, I went up to him and I put my arms around him and I mustered the brightest smile I could muster, and I treated him as a dear long-lost friend. His face lit up like a child when you give him a tiny, shiny trinket. Oh, the inexpressible peace that came over us all. We didn't talk about the trouble. We didn't need to. Amen. He had the right to treat me as he did. I gave it to him. God granting. You see, I was a problem. He was a good man. He had a lovely family. He was a man of God. And I never expect to ever be as good as him. I stand before you today at the Columbus Eastwood Church as he did when he served as your pastor, occupying your pulpit some years ago. I later found out the degree that he was going through at that time. He had lost his son in an accident. God had been trying to use me to cheer him up. God had been trying to use me to let him know that not all you did was in vain, to cheer him up. But I had my grudge. It was hurting me, him, and God's purpose. You never know when God is seeking to use you. You never know. The Bible calls this quench not the Spirit. God is not finished with me yet. This process is not over. He's still teaching me forgiveness. I learned that when I can stand before people and preach each Sabbath and know that I held no grudges, God helping me to forgive, to give to any the right to do what they wanted to with me, then I was free indeed. That still holds true today. But when I see an individual who holds a grudge against me or another, my only feeling can be but of compassion. For they are prisoners. They are bound by their grudge. And this, in some cases, becomes obvious to all except the party holding the grudge. And all can see that they are not free. How miserable are those who are so bound. I've kept a clipping of a newspaper story from years ago in the Washington Post. It seems that a man was riding alone in his car, and a bullet pierced his side window, went through his skull, and killed him on the spot. Upon examination, they discovered that that was no accident, that a 29-year-old young man had stood by the side of the road, had aimed that gun very purposely for the spot when it would happen, when that man would come by, and deliberately pulled the trigger and put that bullet through that glass and in that man's head and wiped out his life. It seems that this 29-year-old man had been carrying a grudge against the man that he killed. For 12 years, back when he was 17 years old, they had worked together, and he had been let go. And he blamed that man for everything that happened to him in the next 12 years. He was living out of a car at this time, still blaming that man. It's sad to say that this matter of grudge taking can exist mostly with those that we love. I had an elder who pastored a church near the General Conference, and he was one of those brethren, and I noticed that he began to be a little hard toward me. He was curt. He was critical. He was unhappy with me. We had a communion service, and I felt that I should do something, so I went to him and said, "I've obviously offended you. Please forgive me and allow me to wash your feet." And he said, "No. I don't like the way you do things, and you're not worthy to wash my feet." Now, Patty reminds me that in the Adventist church, we have a wonderful tradition. Every 13 weeks, we have a communion service and an ordinance of humility in which we can wash each other's feet. So you can't carry a grudge in the Adventist church longer than 13 weeks, can you, Denny? That's the longest you can carry it. So if you're under the sound of my voice today, I know you haven't carried it over 12 weeks, okay? I have learned to mourn the missed chances to forgive. Like when someone was treating me wrong and they died in a plane crash before I could let it fully go. I'll never have that chance. I'm still learning. You know, the deeper we experience the forgiveness of God, the deeper our ability to forgive will be. For in every story, there's the gospel. And in this one, it's in the degree of forgiveness. Now, we are counseled, and I dare say that the majority of Seventh-day Adventists today are well aware of this counsel. It would be well for us to spend a thoughtful hour each day in contemplation of the life of Christ, especially the closing scenes. Now is one of those special times. As we peel back with me these 2 millenniums, these 20-some centuries, these 200 decades, these countless years since Calvary, as we zero in, and do it with me today, zero in on that scene from Calvary on Golgotha's Hill. Watch with me as our Lord, while dying for us, forgave our sins. Did he not? And does he not always initiate forgiveness? Watch near that cross as he, while making this forgiveness possible, cries out to his Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even as he was dying by theirs and our hands, he gave to all the right to do him wrong. Dare we ask in the matter of forgiveness, Jesus, do I have to? Yes, let us, that Jesus may be revealed in us.
Lord, help me live from day to day in such a self-forgetful way that even when I kneel to pray, my prayer will forgive others, Lord, yes, others. Let this my motto be. Help me to forgive others as you forgive me. Let all the wrongs that come my way be laid aside each time I pray, kept there with you forever to stay, while still forgiving others, Lord, yes, others. Let this my motto be. Help me to forgive others as you